Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another thrilling episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Michael Wein. Tonight, we jump into part 2 of our MLB Power Rankings preview, where we do teams 8 through 5 in our top 12 Power Rankings. If you missed last night, we talked about the Cubs, we talked about the Twins, we talked about the Blue Jays, and we talked about the Mariners. Remember, we are doing this in a debate style. I'm the advocate for the even numbered ranked teams. Emmy is the advocate for the odd number ranked teams. We each make our opening statements. We each cross-examine each other. And then at the very end of each team, we make our over-under picks just for fun. Remember, do not put too much stock into the rankings. Put more stock into what we are actually saying about the team and kind of how we project the team. We view these 12 teams as the teams that legitimately have a chance to win the World Series, possibly. So we jump a little, I guess, higher on the ladder here with these next 4 teams than the previous 4 teams, but it's really not that big of a gap when you really boil it down. So with all that being said, make sure you like and subscribe, and let me welcome in my esteemed co-hosts, ready for the baseball season himself. We are now less than 72 hours away from the official opening day. Mr. Emmy Nixon, what's up?
Nothing much, man. I'm feeling good about this episode. I think these 4 teams we're about to get into, I think the difference with these teams is you see the playoff experience with these teams. Like these 4 have either, gotten to the national championship series, have a bunch of players that have done it. And so that's I think to me that's the difference. And I think it'll be a fun episode.
Yeah, so last night we spent about probably 10 minutes per team. So that's probably going to be pretty similar tonight. And then at the end of this episode, along with the end of our next episode, we'll be talking about the schedule for the rest of the week. So let's just go ahead and jump right into today's episode. Why not you introduce our number 8 team, and then I will make my opening statement.
All right, yeah. So the number 8 team for this year is the New York Yankees. You are a Yankees fan, so I'm interested to hear what you got to say, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have the New York Yankees. Their over-under is 90.5. We'll get to that at the end of this segment. I am the advocate, of course. Emmy will play cross-examiner / devil's advocate. We can't mention the Yankees without mentioning what a failure last year was. Last year was a disaster. A lot went into that. But I think when you look at it as a whole, 82-80, it was their worst record in 3 decades. They finished 4th place in the division, missed the postseason. It wasn't necessarily like they were even like in it in September. Most of the time in the Yankees' history, when they have missed the playoffs, it's been like, okay, well, they missed the playoffs, but they were in it until the end. Last year, it was a little bit of a different story. Again, a lot went into that. There were there were a bunch of injuries, including one to their best player. Judge missed a third of the season. Call them excuses, call them reasons, call them whatever you want. That's in the past. The Yankees did a lot this offseason to try to not only, I think, please the fan base coming off potentially the worst offensive season in Yankees history, but just to show that Cashman, Hal, the Steinbrenner family, and Boone himself want to go out and win the World Series. So what did they do? Well, they traded for potentially the best left-handed hitter of our generation in Juan Soto from the San Diego Padres. He is, of course, a 1-year rental, and that's something we might get into later on. But you take the chance on a guy like Juan Soto when you have the opportunity to acquire him, especially if you're the New York Yankees. And when you look back at the Yankees' history, and I'm no expert, but I do know some, when the Yankees have been at their most successful, most dominant, they have had balanced lineups. Righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty. Or they have at least had like 2 to 3 lefties at the very least who could hit for power and really make use of that short porch and right at Yankee Stadium, right? And over the past decade, one of the reasons the Yankees have fallen short, especially in the playoffs, is their lack of balance. It's been heavily right-handed lineup, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of power in the lineup, but not as much balance and not as much timely hitting to go along with some other issues. And so what they did this offseason, and one of the reasons I'm optimistic, they bring in Alex Verdugo from the Boston Red Sox, who's a very nice contact bat that they can slot in at the bottom of their lineup. Hits doubles, hits field to field, can bring you some power, and will, I think, probably run into 15 to 20 homers given the short porch and some of the power that he has. And what have the Yankees been missing in past years? That third outfielder beside Judge and whoever else has been out there, right? So, they've gone through Aaron Hicks. They've gone through a bunch. They've been missing that third reliable outfielder, given that Stanton can't, at this stage in his career, just can't really play the outfield on a consistent basis. They get that. They get another outfielder in Juan Soto, who's like the best left-handed hitter of this generation, has already won a World Series, won a batting title, and has done it on the biggest stage. Now you have Judge and Soto, and you have that balance. I think this lineup is going to hit. Last year was potentially the worst Yankees offense of the modern era. It was bad. It was terrible. And they got made fun of it for that. This year, I think, with the balance that they have, with DJ LeMahieu, hopefully at the top of the lineup, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, then Rizzo, hopefully he returns back to form after his concussion last year. Gleyber Torres is now slotted down in the 5 hole. He had a really good year last year. And then you have Verdugo and potentially Stanton, who's lost weight in the 7 hole rather than way up there in the 4 hole. And then I'm optimistic about Anthony Volpe, the rookie shortstop from last year, who in his rookie season hit 21 homers, had 24 stolen bases. He's a speed demon on the base pass. And he won a Gold Glove at shortstop in his rookie year. I think he had, for a rookie, a pretty good rookie season. I'm expecting him to improve. I think this Yankees offense is going to hit. I think they can be a top 10 offense in baseball. The questions all come with this starting rotation, especially with the absence of Garrett Cole to start the year. They did acquire Marcus Stroman from the Chicago Cubs. They signed him in free agency, rather. And up until, the All-Star break last year, Stroman was actually a Cy Young candidate in the National League. He was having a very good season. He was right up there with Blake Snell and others in the Cy Young race in the National League up until, I guess, Ohtani discovered his injury. And then he dealt with some hip issues. He's been a really consistent pitcher in his career. He's just dealt with some different injuries, and that's the theme of this Yankees rotation. It's a lot of question marks after Cole. Carlos Rodon had the injury last year and never really got back to his form from the previous years. It was a really bad season. He had an ERA close to a touchdown last year, which is terrible. I think it was closer to 7 than it was to 5 or 6. Stroman, I think, can be that stabilizing force a little bit, but they're going to need a bounce back year from Nestor Cortez, who has proven that he can do it on this level, but they're going to need a bounce back from him. And then they're going to need Clark Schmidt, who has really good stuff and is younger and just stepped into the rotation full time middle of last year, but they're going to need him to take that next step and give them more length. All the questions you can have with the Yankees, which are fair, I think come from the starting rotation, the health, and who's going to step up. The bullpen will be good. Yankees bullpen is traditionally pretty good. A although they are going to need Clay Holmes to be more consistent in the closer role. And I think they're going to need Jonathan Loaisiga to step up into the guy that he was 2 years ago rather than the guy who's kind of been hurt and wasn't good at all last year. They have the stuff, though, in this bullpen. My worry is with some of the injuries to the rotation, their bullpen will get burnt out too quickly, and that can spiral downwards fast. But I do think this offense gives me a little more confidence that they'll be able to sustain some of the maybe early struggles of the pitching until Cole comes back.
Yeah, there's a lot there that they made some good moves. Definitely, Soto is being the big one, but to me, it's all about improvement from within. To me, for the Yankees as well, like some of those guys that have been there. LeMahieu is the one I look at. If they can get the best version of LeMahieu, then it really opens things up in my eyes. Like you have, if you look at the best teams in baseball, their first three in their lineup are all mostly like star to elite players. Like that's a common theme in baseball. It always has been, always will be. DJ LeMahieu has to step up and get back to what he was a few years ago. And there's been injury stuff with him, so it's not like it hasn't been all bad or anything, but there's definitely a level that he has to get back to if the Yankees are to reach their full potential. The question, and you brought it up, to me, it has to be about the pitching. What do you think the hierarchy will end up being here for the first few months without Garrett Cole? Like, do you think, like, obviously Cortez, Suarez, like what, like where do you see it all falling together?
Well, I think what we've heard, the good news is Cole does not have a torn ligament in his elbow, and he does not need surgery as of right now. He's going to be shut down for 4 to 5 weeks of no throwing whatsoever, and then he'll start to ramp back up. And the hope is that he can be back early June, maybe middle of June, and kind of, I guess for him, if we could get Garrett Cole rounding into his midseason form, which last year was winning the Cy Young, and it wasn't particularly close. If we can get that, like his midseason form going into the later months of the season, September and October when the playoffs start, I think that could actually be a blessing in disguise. But that's a long way down the road, and you can't really, I guess, bet on that. You have to figure it out as it is right now. I think what it's going to look like is it's going to be Nestor opening day. He's going to be the number one, or at least they're going to try him there. Then they're going to pitch Rodon. They're going to keep him in the 2-hole where he was last year when he was healthy. Then they're going to go with Stroman in the middle. It's kind of like the stabilizing guy, probably the guy I'm counting on the most right now out of all of these guys. Then they're going to go with Clark Schmidt, who was good last year. He just needs to give them more length, and he's young. And then they have a guy named Luis Heel, who's pitched really well during the spring. He's made major league starts in the past. He has really nice stuff. They're going to stick him along with some of their other pitching prospects that they're kind of high on. They're going to try to just get through with some of these younger pitchers that they have and probably rotate them in the 5 spot. Or if Heel pitches well, he'll keep that 5th spot until Cole comes back. There have been rumors about reuniting with Jordan Montgomery. I think those bridges are burned a little bit. And with the Yankees situation in their cap as of this season, a lot of money could come off the books next year. But for this season, the luxury tax is an issue. If they were to get Jordan Montgomery, they basically have to play almost 1.5 times what they actually sign him for because of where they are in the luxury cap or the salary, not salary cap, but the luxury tax. So that's where all the questions are to me. And I think you're right. I think when you look at the Yankees, it's all about who's going to bounce back. Will enough players have bounce back years from last year? The main ones I'm looking at, DJ LeMahieu, as you mentioned. Last year, from a DJ standpoint, wasn't good, or it wasn't great. 243, 327, and a 390. But his second half actually was encouraging. He had an 809 OPS in the second half. He was hampered by a toe injury late in 2022 that carried over into last year. So hopefully with a full offseason, he's healthy, and hopefully if he can carry the second half of last year into the beginning of this year, that would be ideal. Anthony Rizzo is another guy that I looked at. He started the year really, really well. In fact, he was one of the best hitters in the American League up until he had the collision with Fernando Tatis, got the concussion, and just was never the same. In 229 plate appearances before that collision, he hit over 300 with 11 home runs. In the 192 plate appearances after he came back from the concussion, he hit 172 with 1 home run. So there was a clear line of delineation there. Just wasn't the same. The hope is that's all gone, and he returns to at least kind of somewhat resembling that form that he showed and has showed as a Yankee before. And then Carlos Rodon, he's got to be a lot better. He's got to at least be like, he's got to at least look like a number 3 starter in a rotation for this to go completely right. But look, I mean, what makes for a successful season for the Yankees? If you like the Yankees or you don't, the bottom line is the fans, the organization, they expect to win championships. And it's boom or bust, especially this year, because you look at where the Yankees are, you could have a lot of guys in walk years. Soto could be in a walk year if he wants to. Cole could opt out after this year. Gleyber Torres is hitting free agency after this year. There are just a lot of decisions to be made after the season. And so you kind of have this nice window here where if everything goes to plan and this roster can stay healthy and you add Juan Soto into the equation, it could pay off, but it could also go south fast. So in terms of that over-under right there, 90.5, they went 82-80 last year. They made some very nice acquisitions. They're in the American League East with, of course, the Rays, the Orioles, the Red Sox, who people don't think are viable at least for the playoffs this year, but who knows, are the Red Sox. Yeah. And then the Blue Jays, who we talked about last night. I'll let you start on this one. Over under 90.5.
I think I probably lean slightly under. I think 88, 89 wins is around where I see it. I think it'll be them and the Blue Jays battling for that second spot in the AL East. I don't know. I struggle with this. I think it's like right around 90, I think, is where I see it.
I'm going to go slightly over, but I could see it either way. I'll go 91, 92 wins for the Yanks. Only because I feel like they got the best news they could possible with Cole not having Tommy John. And I just think the lineup will pick it up after what was an embarrassment last year. And hopefully they find enough pitching. We will see what happens. Let's go ahead and move on. We spent a long time on that. Our number 17, which we ranked just ahead of the Yankees due to what they did last year, is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Number 7. and you are good to go on this one.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what you have to say about the National League champs of last year.
Yeah, I mean, what's great about the Diamondbacks is they got depth on their lineup. I feel like over the course of last year's playoffs, you saw it. Like they can get production out of their 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th hitters in the lineup at any point, and it really came all together. At certain points last season, though, the offense did struggle at certain points, but I really think what they found at the end of last year is sustainable in terms of this year. Like I think um, some of those inconsistency problems is just young players trying to find themselves, and they went and had that huge playoff run, and now they all have arrived. I think that was just their arrival moment. I think Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll. I mean, you go all the way down the list, and in terms of young cores in baseball, you would probably struggle to find a better one than what's in Arizona right now. Not to mention the pitching, of course, Zach Gallen. What they found last year with Brandon Pfaadt as kind of their third guy of their 3-man weave of a starting pitcher rotation, and then one of the best bullpens in baseball. Now, the question for the Diamondbacks has always been about power. It's been a lot of just get a double here, get a steal there. They're really good at manufacturing runs once they get on base, but they haven't had a guy to just blow the top off and get that 3-run home run to really open up the scoreboard. So I think that's going to remain the question. But as of right now, I have no reason to believe that that's going to hold them back. I think there's reason to believe they're probably going to be active at the trade deadline, maybe looking for that guy. But for right now, I think they're in a good spot, and I think they're going to be right there with the Dodgers trying to challenge for that division, or maybe just slightly below the Dodgers. But I think that even if they play the Dodgers in the playoffs, this is a team that could give them a run with all the pitching that they have, and they're built for the playoffs with the amount of quality pitching they can get from their bullpen. I mean, it's extremely impressive.
Yeah, I don't really understand the over-under line here. They won 84 games last year. They made the World Series. They got better on paper at their over-under is 84.5. I understand they are in a tough division with the Giants making some recent moves, especially bringing in Blake Snell. The Padres, who could be good with some of the moves they've made if their lineup actually gels for once and they stay healthy. And then the Dodgers, who, aside from the Shohei stuff, the gambling stuff, as long as that doesn't go haywire, they're going to be fucking really good. And we'll get to them in our next episode, as you could probably imagine. I just don't understand it, but I guess Vegas is trying to make money, and this is how they view it. I think they got significantly actually better in their lineup with some of the moves that they did make. They weren't like news that you heard about on SportsCenter necessarily that took the front page on ESPN, but they were really good moves for an organization like the Diamondbacks coming off a World Series appearance. For example, you already have that young core that you talked about. You have Corbin Carroll, who was the reigning NL Rookie of the Year from last year. I think he enters this season in the National League as a MVP candidate if he can build off what he did last year. Then you have Gabe Moreno, and that core, I think, is maybe the best young 1-2 punch in the entire National League, outside of maybe what the Braves have in Atlanta. And then you made upgrades, like you bring in Eugenio Suarez from the third baseman from the Mariners. He's an upgrade of what they had last year, an older version of Evan Longoria and Emmanuel Rivera, that third base tandem. Like, I think Suarez is a upgrade because he's a contact bat and he doesn't strike out excessively like those guys could. And then you bring in a guy like Jock Peterson as your big move to be your DH, to platoon him with Randall Grichuk, who you also brought in and over from the Toronto Blue Jays. That DH platoon has a chance to be really good because one's righty, one's lefty, and they both can hit for power. You look at Jock Peterson. Over the last 2 seasons, he has an 841 OPS against right-handed pitchers. Randall Grichuk has a 955 OPS against left-handed pitchers. So when you're facing lefties, you put Grichuk in there because that's where he's been at his best. When you're facing righties, you put Jock Peterson, who's younger and has been really good over the past 2 or 3 years overall. Like, those are just really shrewd moves, and they're clearly strategic about the way that they're doing this, given the numbers I just threw out there. And then you have this top prospect that not a lot of people have heard about, and Jordan Lawler, who could be this year's version of Corbin Carroll. Like, I just really like the way that this lineup is constructed with Christian Walker, Jock Peterson, Gurriel Jr., who had a ton of big hits in last year's postseason and is a veteran. Suarez, who's a veteran and been in the playoffs before. Perdomo at the bottom of that lineup and as a good shortstop. Like, defensively and offensively, they're just solid around the horn. My question, I guess, is, and this isn't necessarily like a skeptical question, it's just like a actual question I have about the Diamondbacks. It's more so, can Brandon Pfaadt build on what he had going last year? He came up, got hit around a little bit initially, went down to AAA, and came back eventually as a new pitcher. And we saw him pitch well in the postseason last year. He pitched 22 innings to a 3.27 ERA with a 1.09 whip. How much can he build on that success? If he can get even better than he was in the second half of last year, this could be a really damn good team. But that's really kind of the only thing. Like, I know their bullpen's going to pitch. I'm high on this Diamondbacks team. This is the over-under so far out of all the teams that we've discussed, where I'm like hammering one side and I'm hammering the over.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the same wavelength as you with that. Like, I just think this team, like, you question, like, going into last year, you question, can these young guys put it all together? And like, we have like a team like that pretty much every year. Like, like, they have a bunch of young guys with a lot of potential, but they probably won't be able to put it all together. But they already did that. And now you come into this year with all of that momentum. I just don't see a world where they don't get it to at least like 85, 86, 87 wins. And that's at the low end to me. Like, I think they could possibly reach 90.
I agree. I wouldn't be actually surprised if they start a little bit slow, but relax, people. Like, we saw the Phillies a couple years ago start slow. They made the World Series. We've seen this over and over again. April, in the grand scheme of things, really doesn't mean shit. Now, that doesn't mean that doesn't apply to everybody. Like, some teams are bad in April and they're just bad for the rest of the season. But
yeah,
you can't apply that to every single team. And so if they start a little slow, don't count them out. That's not what you should be doing. Let's move on. We're both hammering the over on the Diamondbacks. I think that's smart. Number 6. Now we're kind of taking like another step, in my opinion. to the Philadelphia Phillies, who we have ranked number 6. Their over-under coming into this year is 89.5. They're in a obvious battle with the Braves in the NL East for supremacy in that division, and they kind of have been. It's kind of been that way for a couple years now, because the Mets just haven't really reached expectation. There are optimists about the Marlins, but that just really hasn't come together just yet. Yeah, it hasn't come together just yet. Last year, the Phillies went 90-72. They finished second in the NL East, and they, of course, lost in the NLCS to the Diamondbacks. When I look at this Phillies team, obviously, at its core, it's driven by this lineup and the top of their starting rotation. That's what it has been the past couple of years, with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and Ranger Suarez. That's almost as good of a 1-2-3 punch as you can find when healthy in the National League. That's where I'm really confident about the Phillies. I feel like Wheeler and Nola have been fairly durable throughout their careers, and as long as they're healthy, they've proven time and time again that they are very good starters. I think Wheeler's close. I think Wheeler and Nola could both be like 1A, 1B in a rotation when they're at their best. And so I like this rotation. I like Taijuan Walker and the fact that he has major league experience. He's pitched in the playoffs before. He's been good on other teams, and he's in their 4 spot currently, according to most projections. And then you have like a guy like Chris Sanchez, who I don't know much about. That's probably where a lot of the questions come into play with their pitching, is that number 5 starter. But let's be honest here, like a lot of the teams we've already that and a lot of the teams that we've already talked about, they all have questions in that 5th spot. Like the 5th spot just really isn't that important in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the playoffs. Now, that doesn't mean that it's rendered moot and doesn't matter at all, because you do like to have pitching depth because injuries happen and this and that. But if every team is healthy, it's just not as much of a factor as those top 3. And I like their top 3 as much as anybody in the National League. Their bullpen has, it was a liability as recently as like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's gotten a lot better. It's one of the reasons they were able to get to the World Series 2 years ago. And they've made some, shrewd moves in the bullpen. I like Jose Alvarado as their closer. I just like the bullpen. It's not going to blow you away as long as they, stay healthy. I think they have enough in their bullpen with Dominguez, Gregory Soto, Matt Strahm, who's been really good in past postseasons. I think they have enough experience there. But the lineup, I think, is going to bang. What I worry about is the fact that Brandon Marsh, is coming off a major knee surgery. So we'll see how fast of a start he's able to get off to and when he's able to maybe get back to full strength. But when you look at this lineup, it's as good of a 1-2-3-4 start in baseball with Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and JT Realmuto, the catcher. And then after that, you just have a lot of guys who are experienced, can hit line to line, but also bring some power. You talk about, Nick Castellanos, who's come up big at times in past postseasons. Yep. He's in their 6 or 7 hole. Alec Boehm, who's really a nice contact bat. Brandon Marsh, who can bring some power. Bryson Stott. I just feel like this is a really well-rounded Phillies team, and at their best, they should be able to, compete with the the Braves and the Dodgers and some of these other heavyweights in the National League.
Yeah, I mean, hard to argue with that. But my question for you about the Phillies is: we saw in the playoffs last year a team in the Diamondbacks with a lot of bullpen depth and a lot of, I guess, variety within their bullpen to be able to switch things up. Um, throw, 5, 6 pitchers a game at this lineup and kind of, um, and this lineup that kind of was neutralized. Like they never really got into a rhythm. So my question is just coming to this year, like what have they done to kind of address that, like, or if at all?
Um, I don't know that they've done anything in particular. I think they're just counting on, kind of like some of these other teams, some positive regression for some of their internal guys. I mean, we talk about Kyle Schwarber, who, although he brings a lot of power and can run into 30, 35 homers a year, um, he was kind of an eyesore last year otherwise, batting 197. Um, so it's kind of with a lot of these guys that they have, I think it's kind of a balance that you have to walk. There's a fine line, especially come the postseason, of absolutely mashing and being patient in your at bats and getting on base. And I don't think they did enough of the latter, being patient, getting on base. I felt like they pressed a little bit at times last year, and that hurt them. And
Yeah.
to add on to that, I mean, they were kind of the they were favored in that series initially, and I feel like maybe some of that pressure caught up to them a little bit of being the team that most people thought would end up getting to the World Series. I think even us talked about how dangerous the Phillies were last year, and we thought they could get past the Dodgers. We thought maybe they could even avoid the Braves and get there, but it just didn't work out. And
Yeah.
the Diamondbacks played better. Where I have and that's a valid question that I didn't really even think about prior to this. But I think for me, my main question is, and something that's plagued the Phillies in years past is the defense. The defense has not been a strength of this team, to say the least. It's been no secret that they've been a poor defensive team. That was certainly true last year. Kyle Schwarber, awesome DH, can play some first base, but you can't have him playing the outfield. And they were stuck in situations last year where he was playing 103 games in left field, and he's just a liability out there. It's not ideal for your defense. Bryce Harper also coming off that injury, not to the Phillies' fault necessarily, but he kind of had to learn to play first base on the fly, and that didn't necessarily all work out at times last year. They were 27th amongst all teams in defensive runs saved, minus 30. That's bad. And their outs above average was below average. So they need to take Schwarber out of left field. They called up one of their prospects to play center field. I think their defense should be better, given that I think they'll slide Brandon Marsh to left and put their prospect in center, so Kyle Schwarber is not in left field anymore, and he can do what he does best, which is hit. And that should help it. That should help this team more than maybe anything else that they can do at this point. So for me, I'll let you go first. Over under 89.5. It is a lofty number there, but what do you think?
Yeah, that is a pretty high number. Um, I think I do lean like slightly. I mean, it's just there's so many good teams in the NL this year. I can't go over on everybody, but I think it'll be right at 89, 90. So I probably lean slightly under just because I don't know if this team really cares about the regular season that much. Like they want to get hot at the right time. They want to get going like right around, late July, August and find their rhythm. But those early months of the season, I just don't know if they'll be that motivated because this team is built for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I go slightly under. I mean, they could win 89 games and still be under with the 89 and a half. So
Yeah.
I'll go slightly under, but not by much at all. They won 90 games last year, and we'll see where that goes. To our last team of the episode, we're right on track. The Texas Rangers, and you are the advocate for your Texas Rangers. So go ahead. The defending World Series champions, we have them here at 5. Explain why we have them at 5, and go ahead and make your case.
Well, the defending champs return this juggernaut of a lineup, and that's why they still remain firmly in the mix as a team that's extremely dangerous. The questions arise obviously with Jordan Montgomery still being out there as a free agent. They return this lineup, and their defense is going to remain, I think, really good. It's just all about the pitching. The starting pitching, they really leaned on it last year, and they really had to have those games where they were able to get length from Uvalde and all those guys, especially in the postseason. And in the games where they weren't able to get that length, things got a little dicey because their bullpen is not quite what you would want it to be. Let's just say that. But at the same time, with how good this lineup is, they're going to cover up a lot of different warts. I could see them making a move at the trade deadline to kind of round things out and maybe add a piece to this bullpen, or if they don't figure things out with Jordan Montgomery, add one more starting pitcher. And if they're able to do that, they'll be right back playing for a shot of the World Series in October. This lineup is that good, and with that group of Corey Seager, and all those guys, and obviously they did lose Mitch Garver, but on the grand scheme of things, I think they'll still do just fine. They got a lot of young guys that were still learning last year, and they still were able to get production out of them. They might even come back even better this year.
Yeah, the most surprising part of last year in that October run for me with the Rangers was this was a bullpen that was banged on going into the playoffs. Because when you look at last year, they were 24th in bullpen ERA in the regular season, and this bullpen blew more saves than anybody last year. 33 saves blown in the regular season. But this just goes to show you, just get your ass in the playoffs, and you have a chance. And they everything kind of reset for them going into the postseason. They knew what they had. Bruce Bochy, who's won World Series before, remember he had that stint with the Giants, and they won a lot. Had experience. He knew how to manage this pitching staff. And when you look at this bullpen, Josh Spores was a big part of last year's bullpen and the run that they made in the playoffs. David Robertson, who's a veteran, pitched really well in the playoffs. Kirby Yates, who's a veteran, pitched really well in the playoffs. They were able to get, enough out of Aroldis Chapman to where he wasn't a liability. Burke fell out of favor at times last year, but he was important down the stretch. And they were able to kind of work their way around Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez in the ALCS just enough to where the lineup did what it was supposed to do, and that was just bang. And they banged enough to where they won the World Series.
And that was with Simeon struggling too. There's a lot of that.
Yeah. I like this team. I think they're going to have another really nice year. Of course, it's hard to go back to back, as it is in all sports. But you look at the lineup, it's as good as a 1 through 6 that you can have in the American League. I mean, if all these guys play at their best, Corey Seager can be an MVP. Marcus Semien has gotten votes for MVP before. Adelise Garcia, I think, can be an MVP. Evan Carter was a young guy that came on last year, and he was a real stud in the postseason, especially. Josh Young is a really nice third baseman, really nice glove over there at the hot corner. And then, Leota Tavares in the 9-hole came up big last year in certain situations. So I think this lineup, given that they're going to hit, to what extent, I don't know. Will it be a historic offense? Maybe. Could it just be another top 5, top 10 offense that's really good and wins a lot of regular season games? Absolutely. The question for me is obviously the rotation and how do they get through, for you, looking at this rotation right now, with, of course, Scherzer and DeGrom potentially waiting in the wings,
Waiting in the
eventually
wings,
maybe slated to come back. Yeah, maybe closer to middle of the season. Like, let them get healthy, maybe have them come back closer to the postseason. Don't risk re-aggravating something. Let them be fully healthy and come back. But right now, until that potentially happens, my question is kind of similar to the Yankees with this pitching staff. I know Eovaldi's good. That's great. I know he's going to be very solid at the top. But outside of that, what do you kind of see being do you think it's just they have enough hitting and their bullpen will do enough to kind of carry the load? Or do you think there's still potentially an open door to getting Montgomery back? What do they do to kind of, what is the thing that will get them through, I guess, the first half of the season is my question.
Well, to me, I point to the hitting. I feel like if they were to get Montgomery back, I feel like it would have already happened by now. So I'm not holding out hope for that happening personally, but I think the hit has to hold them through. And I think they probably know that. You look at who's out right now, and it's a lot. It's a big chunk of cap space going into two pitchers who aren't going to be playing for the first chunk of the season. So they got to pick up the slack, and they know it. So they just got to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, I think it's a really nice offense. They stay healthy. They're going to hit. I think they have enough on the pitching side of things to where their over-under right now is 88.5. Pretty much across the board when you look at every single book out there. I would go over. I don't know how much over I'm willing to go, given that the Astros still exist. And that's going to be, those games are going to be must watch this year.
Yeah.
And moving forward for this foreseeable future. And we spoke really highly, both of us, of the Mariners last night. We can't deny that either. So it is tough AL, a balanced schedule. But I do think they're going to have enough, even if they only get one of Scherzer and or DeGrom back, and they're 75% of what they've been in their careers. and they add a piece at the trade deadline or two. I do think they will get around. They have the potential to get like 95 wins, but I would bet they're around maybe the 92, 93 win mark when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because the other part of this is you get DeGrom and Scherzer back, and it's like, what are they? Like they're 40 years old. I think both of them are over 40, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
So they've got a
they're
lot of
latter
mileage
stages
in
of
those
their
arms,
career.
man, and you're putting a lot on their right shoulders, man. Like that, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, you got Scherzer, who's I think above 40. DeGrom's not quite that old, but Scherzer, the main guy, coming off back surgery, and then you have, of course, Tyler Mahle and Jacob DeGrom coming off Tommy John. So, although DeGrom's not nearly as old as Scherzer, so many injuries and so much stress has been put on that arm.
Yeah.
That it's just, and he's re-aggravated it, and it's been nagging at him for a couple of years now, going back to his days in New York. It's just kind of like, okay, well, even though I hate to say this because I'd love for Jacob DeGrom to get back to Jacob DeGrom and just be on the field for a season. But I think at this point, you're probably actually more confident in Scherzer getting back than you are DeGrom, just because Scherzer's actually like kind of somewhat proven that he's like been able to get back from injuries and at least be a decent
Like
version
healthy
of
for
Max
stretches
Scherzer,
at
even
least.
at his
Like,
age.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you take that into consideration and then you add a piece at the deadline, absolutely. Like I think this team will find a way to get over. The question is, do they remember that whole thing with the division last year? Like the Rangers had a chance to win the division, then they didn't win the division. The Astros made fun of them for it, and then the Rangers got them back in the ALCS. I think this rivalry that's finally brewing between the Rangers and the Astros moving forward might be like one of the 10 things I'm most excited about going into the baseball season, just as kind of a baseball fan.
Yeah.
I know I'm a fan of the Yankees, but just as a fan of the sport in general, that's one of the things that's at the top of my list going into this year. Those Rangers Astros series, however many there are, the 3 to 4 that we get, I'm circling those on my calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. Yeah, and we mentioned the Mariners, and if the Astros and the Rangers stumble even a little bit, I think the Mariners are going to be right there, like right there behind them. Like if they make a mistake, taking that spot. So
I think legitimately you could see all three of those teams between like if they all are good, you could see all of them kind of in the 88 to 95 win range.
Yeah.
Kind of just going at it. Mano for that division. Okay, so that's our second quartet of teams. Did you take the over on the Rangers, I'm assuming? Are you in kind of the same ballpark as me?
I am in the same ballpark. I'm taking the over, but if there was ever a team that couldn't afford a hitting slump, it would be this one. Like there's definitely a lot of pressure on this lineup to bring it game in, game out. And it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah. Parting shots. I'm assuming we'll probably get to 4 through 1 potentially this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
by the time like middle of next week, we'll definitely have it for you guys. But we had some other stuff planned. I was going to talk about that here in the episode. But parting shots pertaining to these 4 teams. Anything else?
Well, parting shot, I think, is the Yankees, I think, have an opportunity to really like put a wrench in the entire like AL landscape. I think, there was top three last year, like a clear top three. With obviously the Astros struggling for part of the year, but them like getting healthy to close. It was them, the Rangers, and the Orioles. And now with the Yankees possibly getting back to form, it's going to be interesting. The AL is deep, really deep.
Yeah. And even beyond the Yankees, it's the Mariners,
Yeah.
it's the Blue Jays,
Yeah.
the Twins. They're all in the conversation. So, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the schedule that we have planned. It's a 9:20 and we're through our first episode. That doesn't happen very often with us, if you've been watching us for a while
Yeah.
now. With our busy schedules, though, we've had to move some things around. So this is what it's going to look like. Sooner rather than later, the next 30 minutes, we'll have an NBA episode live for you guys. Won't tell you what that is yet, but you'll see. You'll see very shortly. And then tomorrow, Dit Hole. You guys know what Dit Hole is, most of you. We're going to be basically recapping the 4 days that were crazy of March Madness. We'll look ahead to the Sweet 16, second weekend, Elite Eight, et cetera, have our picks change, stuff like that. We'll get into some spring football, and there's another fun segment. I've yet to talk to Emmy about the details, but you'll see. That'll be a fun episode. And then on Wednesday, we'll get back to some of our NFL offseason stuff with a Steelers episode we've been planning for a long time. We'll also be doing a Cowboys episode. And next week, we'll jump back into heavy draft content as the calendar actually turns to the month of the draft, April. And then this weekend, we might have a special March Madness Sweet 16 Elite 8 live stream, depending on what day we do it. So keep an eye out for that. And that's about it. Anything else?
Well, there was news in the NFL also that we'll be discussing in some of those draft episodes. That there's like this like hip throw tackle rule that just came out today, and
The hip drop.
the
Yep.
hip drop thing that it's got the internet buzzing right now. So we'll be discussing that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So with all that being said, enjoy opening day on Thursday. So I don't think we'll be doing 4 through 1 until at least the weekend. If you disagree with anything that we said on today's podcast, that's okay. Tell us why. Give us your reasons. Give us how you would rank these teams. Out of these 4 teams, which team is most likely to get to the World Series, to win the World Series? Out of the 4 teams that we discussed in this episode, is it the Yankees? Do they bounce back and do they finally capture a World Series for the first time since 2009? Is it the Rangers? Do they go back to back? Is it the Phillies? Do they finally get the World Series that they've so largely coveted with this core that they have of Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, et cetera, et cetera? Or do the Diamondbacks, after falling a little bit short last year, come back again and win it this year? There's so many intriguing storylines. Also, in the comments, we'll be addressing it on our next baseball episode. Whose side are you on in this Shohei story that's taken over the baseball world the past 48, 72
Sports
hours?
world, even.
Yeah. There's obviously a lot of information that's still yet to come out. There's an ongoing investigation. But based on what you know, which side are you leaning? What are your theories? We'll be talking about that on the next episode of our baseball preview. But until then, and until 20 minutes from now, we are gone. Peace out.